Hello, wonderful nonprofit heroes and rock stars. Today we are talking about a cornerstone piece of the database puzzle. It's one of those things that's really important to understand how it works in a database, any database, but especially when we're working with Salesforce for your nonprofit. If you're not really familiar with how databases work, this is an important thing. And what we're talking about today is relationships between objects. Objects, if you'll remember from other videos and articles, is they're the big pieces of data that are dissimilar, right? So leads, contacts, accounts, campaigns, opportunities, all of those are objects built into Salesforce. And they connect to each other. That's why we use a database, because I need to be able to connect my data to other pieces of data, objects to objects, so that I can get a full picture of what's going on in my organization. And there's three basic kinds of relationships. The first one, and honestly the one we see least often in Salesforce, is a one-to-one relationship. In the real world, this looks, maybe the best example is a driver's license and a person. So one driver's license can only ever belong to one person, and one person can only ever have one driver's license. If you've got one person using multiple driver's licenses, multiple IDs, something's gone wrong, right? They're doing something shady. And if you've got one driver's license being used by multiple people, also something has gone wrong, and you don't actually have the whole point of the ID, which is to identify a single person. So IDs are a really great example of a one-to-one relationship. And in Salesforce, often this would just be a field. We would type in a driver's license number. But if we had a separate object for driver's licenses that we wanted to connect with our contacts object, it could be a one-to-one relationship. The next one, which is the most common, especially in Salesforce, is a one-to-many. We see this all the time in our organizations, especially, the easiest example is donors, right? One donor, we hope, gives multiple donations over their lifespan with us. One donor, many donations, one to many. An individual donation really shouldn't have multiple donors associated with it. Because then who do you send the thank you letter to? Who do you send the tax receipt to? It starts to get really messy when you start to make it a many to many. So a one to many relationship is what we view for donors. It's a lot of times how we view accounts, right? I have each contact lives in one household account, but each household account can have many contacts. That's a one-to-many relationship. And these are set up with what Salesforce calls lookup fields. And anytime you see like a related list on a record page, down below the details, sometimes off on the side depending on your setup in Salesforce, anytime you see related lists, that's a one-to-many relationship. The third, which is sometimes really challenging for people to understand how to set it up, but we get really intuitively, is a many-to-many relationship. And so we can view this in Salesforce like campaigns and contacts. Each contact will probably go or be a part of multiple campaigns, because every year you're going to be sending those donors their ask letters, right? So each one of those is a campaign, and that contact gets added to that campaign. But each campaign also has multiple people attached to it, because if you send out an end of year letter and you had to create a different campaign for every person, that's a lot of work, and it gets really messy and ends up being way more noise than you need in your life. So each campaign can have many contacts, and each contact can have many campaigns associated with them. This is a many-to-many relationship. And the challenge a lot of times in CRMs is that many-to-many relationships there's not like a field that you create that shows you a many-to-many relationship. You actually have to use what's called a junction table, but in Salesforce, we just create a separate object that connects the two together. And you've already interacted with this in Salesforce through what's called campaign members. So when you add a contact to a campaign, There's actually a separate table between the two called campaign members. And that's what actually creates that many-to-many relationship. So the contact has many campaign memberships, and the campaign has many campaign memberships. And in that table, it all gets intermixed, and that's the many-to-many relationship. And these can be really valuable when we've got complex data situations where we don't want to create an individual record for each individual object. When we need to connect all of those objects and give them lots of options because the real world is complex and our data ought to reflect that. So those really zoomed out broad scale, those are the three types of relationships that you're going to deal with in databases. One-to-one, one-to-many, and many-to-many. I hope this is helpful. Keep up the awesome work you're doing out in the world, and I look forward to helping you have a greater impact in the next video.